Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Pasquette, and I'm an undergrad at Vanderbilt. And today I'll be discussing our project alongside Dr. Tuan on developing an ontology-based framework for immunization data exchange using a blockchain. So here's the main structure of what we'll be talking about today. So I'm going to be discussing some background first and motivations behind our project, focusing on HPV cancer risk and the gaps between VIS and EHR systems and how blockchain can help improve data sharing. Then I'll move into the methodology. And finally, Dr. Tuan will touch on how VIC was evaluated and blockchain implementation, and end with the few limitations and future directions for our project. So let's begin with more of clinical motivations. So HPV remains the most common sexually transmitted infection in the US and accounts for about 5% of cancers globally. The most oncogenic strains are HPV 16 and 18, which are responsible for 70% of all HPV-related cancers. And there's currently only three licensed HPV vaccines, bivalent, quadrivalent, and nonavalent, and they differ mainly by how much of the HPV strains they target against. Bivalent would target two strains, quadrivalent four, and nonavalent nine. So despite the vaccine efficacy, US immunization rates still remain at low levels, particularly among white males, which are the most at-risk group. And these HPV cancer risks are mainly attributed to cervical cancer for low income countries and oropharyngeal cancer for more high income countries. So yes, the low immunization rates can be attributed to some more behavioral factors like hesitancy to take the vaccine, but data is also a problem. Vaccine histories are often fragmented across multiple healthcare systems. Informed consent just adds another layer of complexity as it is federally regulated for like medical interventions and human-based research to require informed consent, but it's not really regulated for the immunization process. Each state gets to decide if a vaccine information statement, which is a detail of the vaccine risk and benefits, and how these vaccine information statements relay their information. So each state getting to decide how these requirements are satisfied leads to more inconsistent documentation. At the same time, vaccination data are siloed across multiple platforms. Electronic health records, pharmacy systems, and state immunization information systems rarely communicate effectively. Each state's IIS pulls data locally, but communication between the states is very limited. Physicians at the point of care aren't really able to fully grasp a patient's previous vaccine history or if they received a prior dose of HPV at another clinic from another state. This fragmentation poses a direct challenge to cancer prevention efforts and HPV vaccination, where having a complete immunization history is essential. So how do we solve this? We turn to blockchain and semantic web technologies. Blockchain offers a peer-to-peer, tamper-proof record-keeping system through a distributed ledger. As seen by the figure below, each block stores some data. And in the case of this project, this data would be immunization information. And every block contains a hash of the previous block, which links the chain together. The semantic web provides the machine-readable way to give the data meaning. Using ontologies, the vocabularies associated with the HPV vaccination process is formed into like a network of relationships to later be integrated with the blockchain. So the main goal of this project is to develop VIC, a knowledge graph that organizes the immunization and informed consent data. Next, to combine VIC with synthetic immunization records. And finally, to implement VIC within a custom blockchain. So to test the VIC frameworks, we develop a synthetic data set to simulate like a real immunization record. Using a custom Python script, which is located on our GitHub, we generated these records based on demographic distributions from the Big Mouth Dental Data Repository, which is an institutional repository that stores EHR data at UT Health Houston. So we use libraries like NumPy, Random, Faker, and Datetime to produce key vaccine information such as the patient name, age, gender, race, insurance, vaccine manufacturer, and the site of injection. Each item was tagged with a VIC-specific identifier, or it was mapped to existing IDs from ontologies like the phenotype and trait ontologies for phenotypes, ontology for modeling, representation, and social entities for the demographics and languages, as well as the vaccine ontology for the vaccine terminologies. These ID act as a link that allows Vic to interpret the information stored in these records and allows for better interoperability between the knowledge graph and the actual blockchain. So how was Vic developed? We extracted terms from a series of documents, including the Texas HPV vaccine information statement, a series of minor consent forms, and MTRAC2 registry entries. Concept maps were generated, which I will show later and explain in detail. And these concept maps illustrate the relationships among patients, consent documents, vaccines, and potential adverse events that may happen from receiving a vaccine. These relationships were modeled with a collection of relational terms from existing OBO ontologies. Together, these provided the framework to formally represent like the inner workings of the immunization process. We constructed Vic using the Protege OWL editor, which allows these relationships to be machine readable. From there, I added the Vic-specific subclasses and object properties to represent the key parts of HPV immunization. To make the process a bit easier, I used the Selfie plugin to batch import the concepts using a system of like hierarchies that was encoded in spreadsheets and sent directly into OWL. So here is an example of a concept map. This is our first concept map that links the vaccine types to the specific HPV strains that they target against. Gardasil, Gardasil 9, Gardasil, Cervarix, which are types of vaccines as denoted in the top left, are connected to HPV types 6 through 58. They each represent a vaccine immunization against microprocess. These viral strains are then mapped to cancers like cervical, anal, vulvar, and oropharyngeal cancers, which kind of shows the chain from infection to disease prevention. The diagram integrates biological and more clinical perspectives, and it illustrates how vaccinations are used to interrupt this like causal pathway from HPV exposure to cancer. Next, this concept map explains the relationship between vaccination and potential adverse events. The diagram shows how Homo sapiens, who serve as the vaccination patient, receives vaccines such as Gardasil or Cervarix from healthcare providers, and any resulting adverse events can be reported on a VAERS. The map organizes these concepts by linking the biological entities and reporting mechanisms. Adverse events are captured by relationships to time, place, and according to the vaccination process itself. This concept map like sequences vaccination doses, and it shows it as a planned process within the vaccine knowledge base. The vaccination dose is a subclass of planned process, and in turn is defined as an occurrence. The chosen predicates precedes kind of implies this temporal ordering of the doses, and it reflects the common structure of how you would expect immunization schedules to be. And finally, this last concept map shows how the informed consent process fits into HPV vaccination as a whole. We can see that both patients, which can include minors, and vaccine administrators participate in this consent workflow that takes inputs such as the vaccine information statements, like I explained before, and signed consent forms. The process produces an immunization record, which documents each vaccine dose from the three HPV vaccines. And the model situates vaccination in a more like social context by including households and highlighting how immunization extends beyond just the patient. Next, I'll pass it on to Dr. Tuan for the remaining results.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Let me share my screen as well. All right. Thanks for the handoff. So we published the latest version of Vic on our GitHub repository. So to access the latest version, we have the IRI that's provided there, as well as our GitHub project page that includes the Vic knowledge graph, as well as the semantic blockchain, which I'll talk about a little later. But as we noted before, we used reused some of the ontologies that was mentioned, like the Vico ontology, which essentially we use that as like our primary framework to develop it, but we also reuse some of the terminologies from the vaccine ontology, OMRC, and so on. So overall, 1,400 classes, 4,000 axioms, eight data properties, and 200 something object properties. So overall, this is like the latest version, and there are probably going to be more updates in the future, as we'll mention later. So this work is kind of like the first step towards uh, the next stage, which is developing the semantic blockchain. So abstractly, the role of the knowledge graph um, links and describes the immunization data with external resources that's pertinent to the immunization data. So potentially, our main focus is on the HPV vaccine. So one thing I need to mention is that we are collaborating with the School of Dentistry that provides HPV vaccines. So there is a concern amongst like the dental clinics to provide HPV vaccines because they're interested in oral cancer and head and neck cancer, as that's kind of falls within their purview. Um, as Kevin has mentioned, we collaborated with them using some of their documentation that they have provided, as well as their databases and EHR records for the metadata to construct the ontology. And so overall, the knowledge graph serves as kind of like the model to support our proposed semantic blockchain, which I'll talk in the next few slides. But before I talk about blockchain in general, so would be hard pressed to not find any literature relating to a blockchain in healthcare. But specifically for vaccines, blockchains, they're you'll find published literature that relates to two areas. One related to inventory management and vaccination certificates and passports. With the latter, most of the literature kind of is from the COVID-19 era. Um, so on the topic of semantic blockchain, so a semantic blockchain marries kind of the features of semantic web, which provides kind of the standardization and the annotation of data, with blockchain, which provides the trust and the immutability of information. So basically, a semantic blockchain provides interoperability between different blockchain networks, as well as with semantic web resources like ontologies. So, for example, one benefit of using, say, ontologies for this work is that we could describe the data and also use Sparkle to query some of the blocks within the chain. But aside from the benefit of using of the querying side, there's also the interoperability benefit. There's also the linked data aspect, and as well as the possibility of doing validating and reasoning on the blockchain. So there are some published examples or that have demonstrated the use of like semantic blockchain, one related to copyright management, Internet of Things, a few like healthcare related topics related to EHR communication, as well as management for pharmaceutical supply chain. Um, so, so in addition to the work that Kevin has been involved in, we're also developing our own semantic blockchain called VicChain that leverages the work that Kevin has done with Vic. So essentially, this is like a prototype semantic blockchain that's a Java-based application that uses Apache Jena as well as Bouncy Castle APIs for some of the cryptographic functions like the hashing, the encrypting, and decrypting. So initially, we were inspired by Nano Publication, which is kind of a peer-to-peer semantic web network. But we kind of so initially we thought about just like encoding just like each triple within the blocks, but it eventually evolved to the point where we just wanted to just encode just the vaccination information events and use that to hash in each block and then link the blocks together. So on the right side, you kind of see an example of like n triple example of a vaccination event that was hashed and used within our prototype uh, semantic chain. But aside from the work related to that, which is going to be like a sequel, the next step would relate to Vic is evaluating the knowledge graph. So we've recruited two or three subject matter experts in public health and VO. And essentially, what we're going to be doing is like translating the axioms into natural language and have the subject matter experts evaluate the veracity of the knowledge graph, and then we'll make final revisions for the final paper, and then maybe in the future look into the possibility of integrating FHIR HL7 terminologies as well as SNOMED CT terminologies. As far as I know, there is like an RDF format of FHIR HL7s that we're looking into. But earlier for our evaluation, we did use large language models to fact check an early version of this work. So, but now we're using subject matter experts to validate the knowledge base. Um, so regarding another future direction for the semantic blockchain is so we'll be generating multiple sets of synthetic data of immunization records and using that data to simulate our blockchain network. So essentially, there'll be virtual nodes of the blockchain, and essentially we want to observe some of the functionality and performance of this semantic blockchain that we've developed. But overall, we want to be able to assess the exchange of patient provider data that's being exchanged, and also being able to update the different nodes within the network. So as Kevin has mentioned, it's a decentralized network, so each node needs to have a copy of the blockchain. So we want to be able to update all of the nodes within the network. And the other features that we're also trying to look into is generating a knowledge graph from the blockchain and also being able to encrypt and decrypt the immunization data that's on the blockchain so that we could develop client applications like what's used in cryptocurrencies, wallets, kind of like the equivalent of that. And that would be like another future direction as well. So overall, as we mentioned, vaccination records are, federated and they're siloed. So technology could help encourage shared decision making, which could lead to increased vaccination uptakes, specifically for HPV vaccine. And it could also help like low resource clinics as well. So blockchain and semantic web technology could help facilitate the interoperability of the vaccination records and also provide like a decentralized network that could be of benefit to low resource clinics that don't want to be coupled with a vendor. So as we saw like a couple of weeks ago, AWS went down and that was like a centralized, everyone pretty much relied on that. But within a decentralized network, if one node goes down, the system is still functioning irrespective of the other nodes. Um, so overall, as a first step, we discussed the development of the graph as being our foundational structure for the vaccination exchange, and utilizing the metadata from immunization resources and EHR. Kevin developed like the data structure and also create like the synthetic data that we'll eventually use for the future projects. And currently we're evaluating the knowledge graph with subject matter experts. So, and overall, the future direction would be developing the semantic blockchain using Vic and assessing the functional requirements that we discussed earlier, and using the synthetic data. So that brings me to the end. We want to thank the Texas and American taxpayers, as well as our collaborators that are involved in this project. And thank you.